Okay, the title of my sermon this evening is Yoga is Definitely Not Christian. What I'm going to say tonight is based on this question from the congregation. Pastor, your Sunday sermon in reference to yoga caused me to want to know more about Kundalini and yoga. I have Christian friends who say yoga is okay. I believe you when you say it isn't, but can you tell me why? I think nothing could be more telling about the sad shape of the American church than the acceptance of yoga now into Christian churches. 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, "Come out from among them, be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you." Yoga is not only one thing in a long list of things that we could call unclean things, but it opens the door to acceptance of other gods and other unclean things as well. I don't know if I ever told you this story or not, but my wife Linda worked at the YMCA preschool in Indiana, Pennsylvania before we moved here. Now, we're talking 26 or so years ago. They were talking then about starting yoga classes at the YMCA. Linda came home all fired up about it and told me she didn't like it and asked me to get her some information. So I gave Linda some information and she went to the director of the YMCA to tell him why a Christian organization like the YMCA should not be offering yoga. In case you don't know or remember, YMCA stood for Young Men's Christian Association. Although unfortunately Christian disappeared from it a long time ago. When the director saw, from what Linda showed him, that yoga was what it was, he immediately put a halt to the yoga classes and thanked Linda for making him aware of yoga's Hindu roots. So they stopped it. That was 26 years ago. By now, though, I expect yoga is a part of the Y, as it is now called. It's the Y, so we don't have to remind ourselves it was the Young Men's Christian Association. I'm sure it's part of the Y there, as it is in most places today. Now, most people in America think that of yoga as nothing more than physical exercise. Their doctor, their physical therapist, their health insurance company, maybe even their pastor may have recommended that they do it. But nothing could be farther from the truth. Because yoga is more spiritual than it is physical. And it is directly linked to Hinduism, and it can and does open the door to the occult. Its acceptance in Christian circles is just one more sign of the apostasy that the Bible warns us would characterize these last days before the Lord's return. Now, I'm no expert on yoga, and it would take me a lot longer than this evening to completely explain yoga and Kundalini energy and all that, but I'm going to try to give us a crash course this evening. The world's largest missionary organization in the world, what would you guess it is? Anybody dare to venture a guess? The world's largest missionary organization. Anybody know? Give you a hint, it is not a Christian organization. Instead, it is a Hindu one. It is called India's Vishva Hindu Parishad. That is the world's largest missionary organization in the world. At the World Congress of Hinduism in January of 1979, where over 60,000 delegates gathered from all over the world, a speaker declared this: "Our mission in the West has been crowned with fantastic success. Hinduism is becoming the dominant religion, and the end of Christianity has come near," he declared. They also said at that gathering that the largest group of missionaries that they had in the West, and I think we all know what the West is, that's us, Britain, what have you. The largest group of missionaries they had in the West were not the gurus that the Beatles and other rockers had brought to America. They declared that the biggest group of missionaries that Hinduism had in the West were the yoga instructors, and that they were succeeding in bringing Hinduism to the West by means of yoga. Now, my old Webster's Dictionary, and I'm glad for that thing, it's taped together, not the new ones. They say a little different thing in a lot of things than the old one. But my old Webster's Dictionary that I have taped together defines yoga as, quote, "a Hindu theistic philosophy teaching the suppression of all activity of body, mind, and will in order that the self may realize its distinction from them and obtain liberation," end quote. If you know anything about Hinduism, you know the Hindu believes that the self is God. So one of the purposes, Webster says, of yoga is to get you liberated so that you realize you are God. Now, how much more New Age do you get than that? And does that sound like purely physical exercise? You want exercise, go up to the gym. They got all kinds of good stuff up there that will help you with whatever you want to exercise. Yoga was designed to yoke or to create union with Hindu deities, of which there are millions of them within Hinduism. We recognize that these so-called deities that they speak of are demons or devils. And that's not my observation. That's according to the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 10:20. So doing yoga can bring you into direct contact with, if not possession, by demons. I'm sure somebody's saying, "Oh, I know somebody that does yoga and they're not demon-possessed." Well, for those who think it is only exercise, a true Hindu will tell you that there is no such thing as yoga without Hinduism. No such thing. yoga is being used to make Hindus out of many naive professing Christians. Although many true Hindus from like India and places like that are not very happy with the increasing westernization of yoga that perverts their religion. Now, various forms of Eastern mysticism have now penetrated every area of our Western society, including the church. And our kids are being indoctrinated with it just in all kinds of ways. Kids' movies, cartoons, all that kind of stuff. Kids' toys are just loaded with all that kind of stuff these days. In the original Star Wars movies, for instance, Luke Skywalker's spacecraft crashes into a swamp and he can't get it out. That was when Luke met Yoda, a strange dwarf-like creature, supposedly of unknown origin. What's interesting is if you turn Yoda upside down and take a look at him, he looks strangely like a Baphomet from the satanic pentagram. It's uncanny. And Yoda is able to lift Luke's spacecraft out of the swamp with his mind. Now, how does he develop such power? Change the D to a G in Yoda's name, and you will discover the secret to his power. Yoga. Change the G or the D to a G. The thinly disguised meditation that he recommended to Luke is how Luke taps into the Force that humans can tap into through things like yoga and meditation. Now, Star Wars just won't go away, will it? And if you think Star Wars and all the spin-offs that followed it is okay for your grandkids, you want to read an eye-opening website, check out 10 things Star Wars can teach you about yoga. It's basically an indoctrination into Hinduism. But deliberately entering into an altered state of consciousness, whether you do it through drugs, or hypnosis, or meditation, or yoga, or any other occult means to discover your inner self, the psychiatrists and psychologists will even try to get you to do it, or to become one with the universe, that is giving permission to evil spirits basically to take over control of your life, whether you realize it or not. Now, there are various kinds of yoga, and they're divided into 4 major categories. Yoga is just not yoga. There's all kinds of it. There's Jnana yoga, Bhakti yoga, Karma yoga, and Raha yoga. The ultimate goal of each one is the same: self-realization, culminating in union with the great all, the Force, the universal self, whatever else you want to call it. We now even have a perversion of yoga called Yahweh yoga. Yeah, that's the name of God, our God. Talk about blasphemy with so-called certified Christian instructors. Wow. There's Hatha Yoga, Tantric Yoga, and others. But the most dangerous and powerful of all yogas is Kundalini Yoga, whose sole purpose is to unleash the Kundalini, or the divine power that supposedly rests coiled around the spine, at the base of the spine of every human being. The Kundalini is portrayed as a serpent. It is even called serpent power. And it is supposedly coiled 3.5 times around your spine. What Christian, and I said this Sunday night, in his right mind, would want to willingly unleash serpent power into his life? Think about how ridiculous that is. The Hindu says when it is awakened by yoga, this serpent power supposedly moves up the spine through 7 chakras, as they are called, or points, until it bursts out through your head into a 1,000-petal lotus flower. When that happens, you are supposedly flooded with divine ecstasy as your individual self is in union with Brahman, which is another Hindu god, or the universal self, which results in self-realization where you realize and wake up, hey, I am God. I am God. But there's dangers to this. This can involve Tantra, which can give you uncontrollable sexual urges, and other dangers, like experiencing violent shaking, hallucinations, murderous impulses. I'm getting this from the Hindus. I'm not taking this from somebody. That's what they say. Speaking in tongues or suicidal thoughts. That's why the ancient Hindu texts all recommend that you always have your guru present to protect you from any potential disasters that may happen when you unleash the Kundalini or serpent power into your life. Now, both the Bible and the occult world of Eastern mysticism, of which yoga is a part, agree that the serpent is a very real and powerful spiritual being. They only disagree as to whether or not he's a friend or a foe. Now, you all know that the Bible clearly identifies the old serpent as our foe. Satan. But in many parts of the world, especially in the East, the snake is worshipped and revered instead. Now, during the 60s, under the influence of psychedelic drugs like LSD, millions discovered there was another dimension of reality that surely was not physical. The message, if you were around then, you remember, was tune in, turn on, and drop out. Those following Timothy Leary's example took the Tibetan Book of the Dead as the guidebook for the LSD experience. as well as other writings from the East. And as long as the so-called trip lasted, the adventure that these psychedelic drugs produced was an adventure that was as real as the universe. Except when you had a bad trip. The dazzling, multicolored shapes that you saw while tripping were consistent with the exotic guise of the gods and demons of India and Tibet. Must be making a comeback. I saw 2 or 3 people the other day with t-shirts on that had psychedelic circles of swirls of colors like they used to talk about with LSD. Dave Hunt wrote this in his excellent book entitled Yoga and the Body of Christ. And I quote him. He said, "It only remained to be discovered that yoga would produce the same trip without drugs. And yoga then took off as a new panacea as LSD began to fade." Dave said, "I remember the mother of a 20-year-old telling me, with some sense of relief and little concern, our son used to be heavily into drugs. But thank God he isn't using drugs anymore because he started practicing yoga." I don't know what yoga is, but it can't be bad if it got him off of drugs. My reply must have shocked her. Dave said to this woman, "I'm glad to hear that your son no longer gets high on drugs. I'm sorry to inform you, however, that he can get a lot higher on yoga than he could on drugs." Drugs were the kindergarten of occultism. Yoga is the graduate school. End quote. Now, I would have loved to have seen the look on that mother's face when Dave told her that. How scary that yoga is being accepted into American churches. I just heard this past week of 2 more churches that I know, where I know them, and they're starting yoga classes in their Christian churches. Consider this also from Dave's book. He said, and I quote, "Yoga is to Hindus what peyote is to Native Americans in their religion. A doorway into the spirit world and contact with entities that may become one's guide, guardian, or destroyer. The source of a spirit guide, whether it's in yoga, Hinduism, the religion of the American Indians, the New Age, or whatever, is always the demonic. And a spirit guide is always a demon, no matter how nice it seems, even if it calls itself Jesus. And here's how a lot of Christians are being duped. They discover a spirit guide, and the spirit guide calls itself Jesus, appears to them, and they think this can't be wrong, this can't be bad, this is Jesus. But their Jesus is a demon in disguise, calling himself Jesus. Now there are all kinds of doorways into the spirit world, like peyote to the Native Americans. Yoga is just one of them, one of many. Back in the 60s, Aldous Huxley's book, The Doors of Perception, had a big part in opening the door to America's youth to drugs, and eventually then to yoga. You might remember that Jim Morrison and the Doors based the name of their rock group upon the concept that Huxley borrowed from poet William Blake, who said, there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors. Yoga, peyote, chanting, all kinds of things are the doors. And after psychedelic drugs began to cool down a little, yoga became one of the means to open the doors into the demonic dimension. And if there was anybody that was demon possessed, it was Jim Morrison, I'll tell you that right now. Now, I don't have time to talk about the danger of the breathing exercises that your doctor may recommend to you. They're all tied to yoga and to Eastern meditation, nor to talk about the relationship of reincarnation to yoga. Hindus will tell you there's no such thing as talking about yoga without talking about reincarnation either. But I need to say this to everybody listening, and there'll be folk listening on YouTube that need to hear this. Have nothing to do with any kind of yoga whatsoever. And warn your friends to stay clear as well. Yoga is not Christian. It is not spiritually neutral. And it will only drive Jesus farther away, not bring him closer. And then I have a friend that sadly was talking about how she needs to try to get in shape. She was going to do that as a New Year's resolution. She said, we're going to try yoga for the whole family. Try the gym instead. Stay away from yoga. It will do you more harm than good. That is, if you care about your spiritual state and if you care about your soul. Now I'm going to stop there, and if any of you have any questions about anything, I know there's a lot of stuff I covered there, but we were asked to cover that, and hopefully there'll be folk that will benefit from that on YouTube as well. You can go ahead and turn it off now. Anybody?